Hey, my name is Kyle Aboshi. I'm the senior investigative reporter here at KGW News, and we just posted a really interesting story on KGW.com looking at Terri Horman. And allegations of an old murder-for-hire case dates back literally 3 decades, far before her stepson Kyron disappeared. It's a story we've been working on for at least a month now and worked really hard to kind of get the background on it, search for records, and talk to those involved, specifically an ex-boyfriend. He claims he was the target of this plot. Now, before we get too far along, a couple things I want to make really clear, that really the focus of this, before we get too far sidetracked here, is Kyron Horman. You know, he's this little boy who disappeared June 4th, 2010 from Northwest Portland. He's never been found. So if you have any information about Kyron's disappearance, law enforcement definitely wants to hear about from you. It connects to Terri because Terri is Kyron's stepmother, and she has long been the focus of investigators looking into his disappearance. She's never been charged with a crime. She claims that she did nothing wrong and has no involvement in his disappearance. Nonetheless, police have been very, very focused on Terri Horman, as has the media, in watching this throughout the duration of the investigation into his disappearance, her divorce and custody hearings, and now some recent troubles in California. And we've continued to dig into Terri's past because we think it's critical, not only to the case of Kyron Horman, but just her behaviors as well. That's what brought us here today. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our reporting, how we got to this point, and I'd encourage you at any point to log on to our comment section. You can leave a comment, ask a question for me, and I'll try and answer those as best I can throughout this. But let me kind of take you behind the scenes if I can a little bit as far as reporting of this story. Hopefully you have a chance to read it and kind of digest it all as far as what happened here. But this is something that I've been looking into for months. I probably got a tip maybe 6 months ago that there was this old murder-for-hire case involving Terri Horman and an ex-boyfriend in Roseburg years and years ago. Worked on it, called around, touched base with various sources trying to get some information about it. Got a little bit of detail, but not a lot, and he certainly couldn't nail it down to the point where I felt comfortable reporting it. So, you know, kind of sat in a folder, and I've got a mountain of folders involving the Kyron Horman case. It's a story I've been working on since he disappeared. Well, we got a tip maybe about a month ago. A coworker came up to me and provided some important information about this case that she had gotten from a source. And that really was the kickstart that we needed to dig back into this. We were able to reach this ex-boyfriend who lives in Oregon, and I'm hesitant to give a lot of information about him. His name is Sean Ray. He's very private and didn't seek the media attention, really didn't want the media attention. It's something where we went to him, and I called him repeatedly, didn't hear back, sent him a letter in the mail, asking some questions, and he finally did respond. We had a lengthy phone conversation where he described the situation and these allegations, and then we actually went to visit him, and he's quite a ways away. And essentially, here's the story that he tells, and this is the focus of our investigation. He was dating Terri Horman back in 1990. They were young. Terri was 20 years old at the time. He claims it was a relationship that was kind of on the rocks, and yet they went out that summer and had Chinese food in a park, and were sitting there. Mr. Ray says that as they were sitting there, he saw a man come out of the bushes with a gun, pointing it at him and approaching quickly. He claims that Terri turned and said, "He's here for you," pointing to the gunman. Ray says he took off running. No shots were fired. He didn't report it to police. He just thought it was weird at the time. He wasn't quite sure exactly what happened. He's a young guy, but that was bizarre, right? So they separated, went their own way. He actually moved to Eastern Oregon, had forgotten about Terri Horman, or Terri Moulton as she was known at the time. So 2011 rolls along. Police are investigating Terri Horman for the disappearance of her stepson, Kyron Horman, asking everybody who knows Terri Horman, what do you know about her? What do you know about her past? They reach out to this gentleman and say, hey, we remember that you, or we have information that you dated Terri Horman or Terri Moulton some years ago. Do you remember anything about it? He says, yeah, I told this story about this alleged murder-for-hire plot that he thought was bizarre. Well, they inform him, listen, we have information from a prison inmate who confessed and tells essentially the same story about an alleged murder-for-hire plot. So here you have two individuals, don't know each other, don't appear to have any connection, telling essentially the same story about an alleged murder-for-hire plot in 1990. Police are really interested about what this Sean Ray has to say. They fly him back to Portland, interview him, have him testify at one point before a grand jury. That's all secret, so we don't know exactly what he testified. They also drove him to Roseburg and drove him around a little bit, and Mr. Ray says that they had him go to the park and point out specifically where this allegedly occurred. And that's where we're kind of stuck, because that was in 2011, and here we are in 2017, so what's happened during this time? Well, that's when I started digging into it, right? 2017, filing some public records requests, calling people, inquiring. And in reaching out to Roseburg police, they say they're not able to release the police reports. Why? Let me read you specifically what they said here in response to my public records request. This report will be referred to the DA's office for review in the near future and remains open, suggesting it'll be passed on along to prosecutors for consideration. And we're still trying to get a hold of these records, but I think that's a critical element in their response, is that this is still open, and they're hoping to send it on to the DA's office for review. As part of this investigation, we also went to a criminal law expert, professor at Lewis and Clark, and he made some really interesting points. One, keep in mind, it sounds really good on the surface, right? You got two individuals that sound like they have the same exact story. Sounds like a pretty solid case. But you've got to consider a couple things. The biggest hurdle is prosecutors have to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. If you're a juror, there can't be any doubt. No question, right? That's a big hurdle. And you've got to consider what they're up against. They need to look at potential for physical evidence. Again, this allegedly happened in 1990. That was a long time ago. Witness credibility. There's a lot of time that's passed by, and it's basically one person's version, or maybe two people versus someone else. And that's the challenge. Now, that's not to say there won't be criminal charges. We don't know, and it'll be curious to see how this plays out. Terri Horman has some legal challenges she's dealing with already. In fact, she goes to trial down in Northern California in May. She's accused of a misdemeanor. It's a theft of a handgun. She's accused of stealing a gun from her roommate. At this point, that's still a go as far as that trial. So she's still dealing with that. There's also been another case down there involving a boyfriend again, and that resulted in a restraining order. So there has been some trouble recently involving Terri Horman, who's now living down in California. We've tried to reach her as best we can and haven't gotten any response from her. We should also note this idea of an alleged murder for hire, that may sound familiar to you if you've been following this case, because during divorce proceedings, her then husband, Kyron Horman, filed a restraining order, and in that order he claimed that Terri tried to solicit the family landscaper to have him killed. So again, you kind of see this pattern that we've heard before. Again, she was never charged with a crime in that case. They were divorced. Custody was granted to her now estranged husband, Kyron Horman. But certainly raises some questions. The biggest question that I kind of have at this point, after looking at all this, is so why are detectives down in Roseburg now suddenly taking an interest in this case? Allegedly occurred in 1990. They completed a police report in 2011. Why are they just now so interested in it? Why are they now taking it to the DA to consider prosecution? We reached out to both the DA and to the police chief. I've called and emailed him. The police chief hasn't gotten back to me. I hadn't heard back from the DA as well. Again, we're working hard to get these reports, and I think that's the next step, is try and see what kind of documentation we can get and see if we can get a little bit more information on this. Let me look and see some of the comments and see what we've got, and maybe there's a few things that we can answer as we looked into this. Again, if you want to see the full report, it's on kgw.com. It kind of details exactly what we've been working on and what we found out about Terri Horman and her background. Again, it's a case that a lot of people have been looking at and have a lot of interest in. You know, not only from the time that Kyron disappeared has there been a huge following, but this story has attracted a lot of interest. People magazine, Terri Horman appeared on Dr. Phil not too long ago, at that point claiming she had nothing to do with Kyron's disappearance. So there is a great deal of interest in this case. And so I'll keep looking here. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask those, and I'll be happy to answer them as best as I can. It's a story, obviously, that, and I want to reiterate the importance of the focus here. While the media, and certainly police, have spent a lot of time looking at Terri Horman and asking questions and digging in her background, the fundamental question remains, what happened to Kyron Horman? And again, he disappeared June 4th, 2010. He was a second grader at Skyline School. At the time, there was a tremendous search effort underway to try and find him. Police and the FBI were involved, canvassed the neighborhood, questioned his classmates, young students at the time, their parents. school administrators, and they say that the case is still open. They're still working to figure out what happened to him, and you know, I think the entire community would like to know exactly what happened to Kyron Horman.
I've got some questions here.
Yeah.
So Amy Rebecca asks, why did the ex-boyfriend, Sean Ray, wait until now to divulge his information?
Good point. This is John Tierney, a special projects producer who's chiming in with those questions, asking about why this ex-boyfriend, Sean Ray, is coming forward now. Again, I should note, he didn't come to us. This is a situation where we reached out to him repeatedly. He's very reserved. He frankly didn't want the media attention. He's living a fine life without all of this and frankly doesn't want to deal with it. He was willing to speak with us after we probed, and really, in talking with him, we explained that one, I mean, we're trying to figure out what happened to Kyron Horman, and we're trying to find out more about Terri Horman's background. We also, after learning about this, wanted to know why prosecutors and police weren't doing more. And that's kind of his feeling is, listen, he did come and talk to police. When they approached him in 2011 asking about Terri Horman, Terry Moulton, do you know anything about her background? And he volunteered this information about an alleged murder for hire plot. You know, he was very cooperative with investigators. He was subpoenaed, we believe subpoenaed, or may have voluntarily gone and testified before a grand jury in Multnomah County. He went with investigators down to Roseburg. And so he has been more than cooperative from all accounts, and yet nothing has really happened. He doesn't get the sense that prosecutors have considered this case down in Douglas County and Roseburg, and really doesn't feel like police have moved on it. And so he's a little bit frustrated in all this, frankly. And there are some security concerns from his perspective, and so he didn't appear on camera, and we should note that. Our story will be airing on KGW at 4, 5, and 6 o'clock. We don't show his face. We didn't use an interview. We didn't do an on-camera interview with him. We tried to, but he was hesitant to do so. But on 2 separate occasions, we spoke with him at length, on the phone and in person. In both cases, he told essentially the same exact story, recounting what happened back in 1990. Let's see if we can find some other questions here.
Terry Kaufman asks, are authorities continuing to stay on Terry? I think she's asking if they're still investigating Terry. What do we know about that?
Yeah, good question. The question being, you know, are detectives still on Terri Horman, still looking into Terri Horman? And every indication we've been given is yes, very much so. Police have made a few statements along these lines that is an open investigation and they're looking at her. Police have never officially named her as a suspect. A judge in a hearing, and I believe maybe even a written order at one point did, and that's probably the closest we've come to an official naming her as a suspect. She's never been charged with a crime in the case, but no question, police are looking at Terri Horman and her behaviors. I mean, we have it confirmed that Multnomah County investigators were in contact with detectives down in Northern California when a couple incidents came up recently, one being the gun charge. There's also this claim of domestic violence involving an ex-boyfriend. And detectives here have been in touch with investigators and witnesses / victims down there as well. So they are watching the situation very closely, and frankly, they know about this situation down in Roseburg as well. It's my understanding that the gentleman, Mr. Ray, we spoke with, has been in contact with investigators up here fairly recently, reached out to them when we reached out to him to say, hey, news media has touched base with me and wants to know about this case. We don't know exactly what were involved in those conversations, but we do know they're occurring. So, yes, Multnomah County Sheriff's Office is closely involved in what's going on with Terri Horman and also the ongoing investigation. But as far as Kyron is concerned, you know, there's been no information to suggest that they have any new leads or new information. And I think that's the frustrating thing for a lot of people who have been following this case closely is, you know, they want to see closure. They want to find this little boy. And for the family of Kyron, you know, how can your heart not go out to them? You know, they're left with this question. What happened to this little boy? And I think everybody would like to see that resolved one way or another.
Rob St. Helen asks, at what time does the DNA just get old or bad when it comes to finding Kyron? And I think he kind of speaks to what other people are asking about where does it stand with actively searching for Kyron?
Right. DNA is a good question, and I'm not an expert in this, so I'm hesitant to go down that road. But just in speaking to the evidence of the case and also the investigation, I've spoken with prosecutors, former prosecutors, criminal law experts, professors in the past, and they all seem to agree. You know, first of all, there's no statute of limitations on murder, aggravated murder, attempted aggravated murder, solicitation of murder, anything murder related. There's no statute of limitations in the state of Oregon. So, first of all, as far as prosecution of this, and again, there's been no charges, there's no limit on when prosecutors could bring a case. The challenge is the evidence side of things. And even in this murder for hire case, and this is what our expert at Lewis and Clark touched on, you know, as a prosecutor, you've got to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. I read a lot of comments on social media, and a lot of people have said to me, hey, listen, why don't they just prosecute this case? You know, it seems like they've got all the evidence. Again, there's this hurdle in the legal system that is beyond a reasonable doubt. And to assemble a jury and to prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt really is not as easy as you may think. And so prosecutors really have to have it nailed down. And especially in this case, you know, there are, first of all, we don't know the evidence they have in hand already, so we're kind of at a disadvantage here in judging whether they should prosecute the case or not. But at the same time, you know, we've got a little boy who's still missing, and that obviously presents some challenges. Not to say it couldn't be prosecuted. There have been cases prosecuted before where an individual is still missing. But I think if you asked most seasoned prosecutors, they'll tell you that definitely presents a challenge. We'll kind of leave it at that. And I think if there's former prosecutors out there who want to weigh in, we'd certainly love to hear from you, because I think that's an interesting perspective and kind of the food for thought that a lot of us need in stepping back for this. Because we do look at the comments, and I think a lot of people, they want justice, obviously. They want the case prosecuted, but we all kind of need to temper expectations and understand how the judicial system works. And I keep reminding folks, and again, I apologize, it's like the third time I've said this during this Facebook Live, is at the end of the day, Kyron Horman is still missing. And while our focus is on Terri, and we continue to report on it aggressively, and law enforcement continues to look at her aggressively, at the end of the day, this all stems from the disappearance of a little boy in Northwest Portland. Let's see if we got some other questions here. John, if you see anything, great.
Well, Margie Smith asked, this is kind of a procedural point, I guess, early in the investigation. Did they ever give Terri a lie detector test that we know of at any point? Right.
Good question as far as a lie detector test and Terri Horman. In the days following Kyron Horman's disappearance, and even Terri has talked about this openly. Most recently on the Dr. Phil show, she talked about being given a lie detector test and readily admits that she failed that lie detector test. Now, she claims there are some reasons behind that. One is that she has difficulty hearing, and that may have contributed to this as well, and has kind of challenged the outcome of this. She's also challenged investigators, generally speaking, to say it's part of a broader conspiracy. But yes, as far as we know, based on Terri Horman's statement and also statements from Kyron Horman's biological parents, Terri Horman was given a lie detector test shortly after this little boy disappeared, and she admits that she failed that. Now, does that prove anything? I don't know, but to answer the question, she was given one.
You touched on this a little bit. There was a little mini debate going in the comments here. Do you think eventual prosecution of whoever is responsible in this case hinges on finding Kyron?
Again, probably a question better suited for a prosecutor, but just in speaking with them and based on my experience in covering cases like this before, that's not going to keep a prosecutor from going after a case, from filing charges if an individual has not been found. You can still prove that case, and there have been examples of that where defendants have been prosecuted successfully while the alleged victim is still missing. It does present some unique challenges, though, and like I said, any good prosecutor will tell you that you've got to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt, and it really comes down to the evidence and the witnesses involved and their credibility. And in focusing again on this kind of gets away from the Kyron investigation, but more so to this alleged murder for hire plot that her ex-boyfriend claimed happened in 1990. I mean, in that case, for instance, that's a lot of time that's passed by, and one's memory may not be quite as sharp, and so to put that individual on the witness stand and question them and have them be cross-examined, it could be a little more challenging. Not to say it couldn't be prosecuted. It just brings another dynamic and another element to this.
Wayne Marie AG writes, how often are searches being performed to find Kyron, and when is the next one planned?
Good question. In the early stages of the search for Kyron, these searches were well publicized. We were told, listen, there's be a media staging area here on Skyline Road. We're going to have search crews going out. If you'd like to follow a crew, we can set you up with somebody, or at least you can document it from the road and see what's going on. Additionally, there were just a lot more people out there, so it's pretty easy to spot that we had search crews out and about. Since then, there have been sporadic searches, some of them voluntary, some of them crews that have come in with search dogs from around the country to help, some of them organized by Desiree Young, Kyron's biological mother. Some of them organized as training missions by Multnomah County and local search and rescue agencies. And most recently, we haven't been aware of them. It's something where somebody on social media spots a search and rescue crew, takes a photo, posts it on social media. That generates a lot of buzz and a lot of thought, oh, did they find something? What are they looking for? And then as journalists, we go out and try and get confirmation on what are you looking for, why are you looking here, and who is involved in this search. And sometimes they're forthcoming and they say, listen, for instance, maybe a couple months ago, there was a search out on out near Sauvie Island. And, it kind of blew up on social media. There was a lot of buzz about it. When we asked investigators, they said, we can confirm it was a training mission that was going on associated with an old case. And I think they eventually later confirmed that it was related to Kyron, but it wasn't one piece of evidence that led them there. It was just kind of the ongoing investigation. We'll see. This is where, you folks kind of help us out there as the eyes and ears. If you see what appears to be investigative activity, a search crew going out, I'd be interested to know about it. You can send me a message on Twitter or Facebook, and maybe we can help to find out what's going on, or dispel rumors or false information that may be out there. Because that's the other challenge in covering this case for so long. You hear people saying things all the time, and unfortunately, not all of it is true, and that's where, hopefully, as a reliable source and somebody who's been covering this case since the beginning, I have the ability to reach out to those who are in the know, who are directly involved in this case, who are investigating, who are family members, or like in this most recent case, we can file some public records requests and try and shake things loose so we can get a better understanding, or at least try to get a better understanding where things stand, and then potentially what they're looking into, and like in this most recent case, why it's taken so long, and are they getting anywhere with it? Let's see if any other questions here.
Kyle, Gina K. Sellers asks, how can we as the public help?
Good question. How can we as the public help? I think first and foremost, don't forget about this little boy. This is really the focus, and I know there are still flyers and pictures out there, some on storefronts, some elsewhere in the community, but continue to distribute his photo. I realize that it may not be a recent photo, but it's still of value. And most importantly, and police have said this for years, if you have any bit of information, call investigators, call the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. I mean, those tips are so valuable. You think about, as an investigative reporter, I rely on tips. I rely on the community coming forward and saying, hey, Kyle, I heard about this. This doesn't sound right. Or, hey, Kyle, I got scammed. Or, I heard this may be going on. I'm not sure if it's true or not. That's valuable information. And as an investigative reporter, then I take that little nugget and I'll go off and try and find out whether it's true or if there's anything of value there, anything worth digging into. Same applies to police. I mean, the more information they have, the better. And really, I mean, I don't know how many crimes that I've covered where it's just been that one little nugget, that one little tip, sometimes even anonymously, provided to police that sent them down the right trail, and they were able to figure out what happened and solve the crime and prosecute the individual and bring them to justice. And I think, in this case, like many others, it's just going to take that one tip. Somebody out there knows something. Somebody has information. And you bring up this case to a lot of people who lived in this community for a while, and they really appreciate the fact that, we all want to find him. We all want to find Kyron, and it's just going to take the community kind of stepping forward and coming forward with that one tip. So again, I can't encourage you enough. If you've got information, provide that information to police. Again, I appreciate all your comments and questions. I'll try and answer them as best I can. We'll be live on KGW at 4, 5, and 6 with our broadcast story, kind of putting it all into context. Also, we've got our full story on kgw.com, and I encourage you to read through that as best you can. And if you have any other information or tips, you can hit me up directly on Twitter or Facebook. I'm happy to do what I can. But again, the headline, our investigative report looked at allegations of a murder-for-hire plot involving Terri Horman back in 1990. It involved an ex-boyfriend. He's telling the story now, and Roseburg police confirm they're looking into it and plan to pass that on to prosecutors for review. I'm Kyron. Thanks for joining us.